The future I don't rush but fully believe in. I don't imagine our future the way most people do. I don't see a highlight reel. I don't picture perfection. I don't chase the image of happiness the world keeps selling as success. I see is quieter. And because it's quieter, it feels real. When I think about us after we marry, I don't feel urgency. That matters to me. Urgency usually means fear is nearby, fear of losing time, fear of missing something, fear that if you don't move fast enough, life will leave you behind. What I feel instead is steadiness, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. I can't wait to see what we become together. Not because I think marriage will suddenly change who we are, but because I know it will deepen what already exists. Marriage isn't a transformation, it's a commitment to continuity. And continuity is where real growth happens. I think about how many people treat marriage like an arrival point. Like once you reach it, everything stabilizes, everything settles, everything finally makes sense. I don't see it that way. I see marriage as permission, permission to grow slowly together, permission to change without fear, permission to build something that doesn't need to impress anyone else. I imagine waking up next to you, not feeling like anything needs to be said, not because there's nothing to talk about, but because silence feels shared. That kind of silence doesn't exist without trust. I think about mornings after we marry, not romanticized ones, real ones. Mornings where one of us is tired, where conversation is minimal, where the day hasn't softened yet and still there's no distance. There's just presence. Ourselves from the world, but choosing carefully what we let in. Not every problem deserves our energy. Not every opinion deserves access to our home. I want our marriage to feel like shelter, not exposure. I think about how marriage will teach us boundaries, not walls. Boundaries that preserve intimacy instead of eroding it. Boundaries that say, this matters enough to protect. I can't wait to see how marriage changes, how we experience time, how days feel fuller without being busier, how rest becomes something we allow instead of something we earn, how slowing down together stops feeling like falling behind. I imagine the quiet pride of building something stable, not flashy. Stable stability doesn't trend well, it doesn't get applause, but it lasts. I think about the kind of home we'll create, not a place, a feeling where mistakes don't feel catastrophic, where honesty doesn't threaten connection, where rest is allowed. That kind of home isn't built with grand gestures, it's built with consistency. I can't wait to see how marriage makes us more accountable, not in a restrictive way, in a meaningful one, knowing that our words land somewhere, that our choices affect someone else's inner world. That awareness changes how you live. I imagine us learning how to be quiet together without disconnection, how to be alone together. It's one of the deepest forms of intimacy. I think about how love matures, how it moves from intensity to depth, from excitement to steadiness, from excitement to choosing. I want to live inside that evolution with you. I don't romanticize marriage as constant happiness. I romanticize it as shared responsibility, responsibility to communicate, responsibility to repair, responsibility to keep choosing each other even when things feel ordinary, especially when they feel ordinary, especially when they feel ordinary. I can't wait to see how we grow into each other's rhythms, not forcing alignment, finding it, adjusting, learning that process never ends. I imagine us facing challenges without dramatizing them, not minimizing them either, just meeting them honestly together. I think about how marriage will challenge us to stay curious, curious about who we're becoming, curious about how the other person is changing, curious enough to keep learning instead of assuming. Curiosity keeps love alive longer than certainty ever could. I can't wait to see how marriage grounds our ambitions, not limiting them, grounding them, giving them context, purpose, direction. I imagine celebrating wins quietly, not for validation, for acknowledgement. I imagine failures being met with support instead of shame. That kind of emotional safety doesn't happen accidentally, it's chosen. I think about how marriage will teach us when to hold on and when to let go, when to push and when to pause. Those distinctions shape a life. I can't wait to see how we become more ourselves together, not merged, integrated, two full people choosing partnership instead of dependence. I don't see marriage as an ending to independence. I see it as an evolution of it. Independence that no longer needs armor. I imagine years passing without urgency, not drifting, rooted. I imagine trust deepening instead of fading. I imagine love becoming something that doesn't need to announce itself anymore. I can't wait to see what we become together after we marry. No. And silence means reflection. when it means exhaustion, when it means something deeper needs to be addressed gently. I imagine fewer words but more understanding. Marriage to me isn't about closeness every moment. It's about availability, knowing that even when one of us pulls inward, the connection isn't threatened. Knowing that space doesn't mean distance. Knowing that rest doesn't mean neglect. That level of trust doesn't arrive instantly, it's built. I can't wait to see how we handle disagreements after we marry alongside. Not whether we have them, we will, but how. I imagine us learning how to pause instead of escalating. How to recognize when an argument is really about fatigue or fear instead of the surface issue. How to apologize without defending ourselves. How to forgive without storing resentment for later. That kind of conflict resolution is a skill you only develop when you care enough to protect the relationship instead of winning the moment. I think about how marriage will change the way we listen. Not listening to respond, listening to understand. Listening to what isn't being said as much as what is. Listening without rushing to fix. Listening without turning vulnerability into a problem to solve. That kind of listening creates safety. I imagine us learning each other's limits, not pushing past them, not testing them, respecting them. Marriage doesn't mean unlimited access to someone's energy. It means shared responsibility for preserving each other's well-being. I want us to be the kind of couple that notices burnout early, not after damage has already been done. I can't wait to see how our priorities shift, not because marriage demands sacrifice, but because it clarifies what matters. Things that once felt urgent will lose their grip. Things that once felt important will quietly fall away. We'll choose rest over noise more often, depth over distraction, peace over unnecessary chaos. Those choices compound over time. I think about how marriage will challenge our egos, not by humiliating us, by asking us to soften, by reminding us that being right isn't as important as being kind, that holding on to pride costs more than letting go ever will. That vulnerability isn't weakness when it's met with respect. That's the kind of challenge I welcome. I imagine how marriage will make us more intentional with our words. Words land differently when someone has committed to hearing them for a lifetime. Careless language becomes more costly. Thoughtful language becomes more powerful. I want us to speak to each other in ways that leave room for dignity, even when we're frustrated. I can't wait to see how marriage teaches us patience with change, because we will change individually together, not always at the same pace. I imagine seasons where one of us grows faster, struggles longer, or needs more support. I imagine learning how to adjust without resentment, how to celebrate growth without comparison, how to stay curious instead of threatened by change. That adaptability keeps love alive. I think about how marriage will change the way we experience success. Success won't just be personal anymore, it will be shared. I imagine celebrating each other's wins without competition, supporting each other's ambitions without fear of being left behind, understanding that one person's success strengthens a partnership rather than disrupting it. That mindset doesn't come naturally to everyone, it's cultivated. I can't wait to see how marriage deepens our sense of responsibility, not obligation. Responsibility that comes from care, knowing that your actions ripple into someone else's emotional world. Knowing that neglect isn't always love, sometimes it's subtle and therefore more dangerous. I want us to be attentive without being controlling. I imagine the way our home will feel after we marry, not perfect, lived in a place where conversations don't feel rushed, where silence doesn't feel awkward, where mistakes don't feel catastrophic, where honesty doesn't feel risky. That kind of environment doesn't happen accidentally, it's built through consistent choices. I think about how marriage will change how we experience loneliness, not eliminate it completely, but soften it, knowing that even when you feel misunderstood or overwhelmed, you're not facing it alone. Knowing there is someone who knows your patterns, your fears, your history, and chooses to stay. That kind of companionship changes how you face life. I can't wait to see how marriage teaches us restraint, not suppression. Restraint is care not to wound unnecessarily, care not to withdraw when it's uncomfortable, a care not to use love as leverage during difficult moments. That kind of restraint requires maturity. I imagine us becoming more forgiving over time, not because we lower standards, because we understand context. We'll learn which mistakes come from exhaustion, which come from fear, and which need deeper attention. We'll learn how to forgive without forgetting and remember without reopening wounds. That balance is delicate and powerful. I think about how marriage will ground our identities, not erase them, strengthen them. Knowing who you are becomes easier when you're not constantly proving it. Independence doesn't disappear in marriage, it matures. I want us to be strong individuals who don't need armor around each other. I can't wait to see how marriage slows us down. In a world obsessed with speed, choosing slowness together is radical. Choosing depth over immediacy, choosing presence over productivity, choosing quality over or quantity. Those choices shape a life quietly. I imagine years passing where love doesn't need to announce itself anymore. It doesn't need reassurance every day. It shows up through consistency, through shared habits, through mutual respect, through staying when it would be easier to disconnect. That's the love I want to build with you. I don't expect marriage to solve problems. I expect it to change how we face them together without drama, with intention. I can't wait to see what we become together after we marry. Not because I expect perfection, because I expect growth that feels human, messy at times, gentle at others, but always honest. This is the future I hold in my mind, not as a promise, as a choice I'm ready to make again and again. When I think about the life we'll build after we marry, I don't imagine a single turning point. I imagine repetition, and that might sound unromantic to some people. But to me, repetition is where love becomes real. It's in the choosing that happens over and over again long after the excitement has settled into something quieter and more demanding. Because love that lasts isn't built on moments, it's built on days. I think about the days that won't feel special at all. Days when work drains us. Days when we misunderstand each other slightly. Days when one of us is distracted, tired, or not fully present. Days when affection isn't effortless and patience has to be intentional. Those are the days that define what we become together. Not the celebrations, not the milestones, the ordinary days where we still choose care. Marriage to me is the decision to stop living reactively. It's the choice to build something that doesn't collapse every time life gets uncomfortable. I imagine us learning how to respond instead of react, how to pause instead of escalate, how to listen instead of defend. Those skills don't arrive naturally, they're practiced. I can't wait to see how we grow into that practice, not perfectly. Honestly, I imagine us learning each other's triggers slowly without weaponizing them. Imagine recognizing when an argument is about the present and when it's about something older that needs gentleness instead of logic. That kind of emotional literacy doesn't happen overnight. It happens through care. I think about how marriage will challenge our expectations. We'll come into it with assumptions, even if we don't realize it. Expectations about how love should feel, how effort should look, how support should be expressed. Some of those expectations will be fair, some will need to be adjusted. I imagine us learning how to negotiate those expectations without resentment, without scorekeeping. I can't wait to see how marriage teaches us to speak clearly instead of indirectly, not hinting, not hoping the other person notices, actually expressing needs without accusation or fear. That takes courage, and courage grows in safe environments. I imagine us becoming more emotionally fluent together, learning the difference between frustration and hurt, between withdrawal and exhaustion, between silence that needs space and silence that needs invitation. Those distinctions prevent so much unnecessary pain. Marriage will teach us how to be accountable without being controlling. I think about how important that balance is. Holding each other responsible for how we show up while still respecting autonomy. Caring to say something when something matters, but not trying to manage each other's emotions or outcomes. That kind of partnership is rare, and I want us to build it intentionally. I can't wait to see how marriage shapes our patience, not the kind that tolerates harm or neglect, the kind that understands process. Growth doesn't always look linear. Healing doesn't move at the same pace for two people. There will be seasons where one of us needs more grace than the other. I imagine us offering that grace without resentment. I think about how marriage will refine our sense of teamwork, not dividing life into equal halves, but into shared responsibility. Some days one of us will carry more weight, other days the roles will reverse. I don't want us counting contributions, I want us noticing effort. Effort is the real currency of partnership. I imagine how our communication will mature, not becoming quieter because we have less to say, becoming more intentional because words matter more. We'll learn how to address issues early instead of letting them accumulate. We'll learn how to apologize without defensiveness. We'll learn how to forgive without forgetting our own boundaries. Those habits protect love. I can't wait to see how marriage teaches us to rest together, not just physically, emotionally, resting without feeling guilty, resting without feeling disconnected. resting in the knowledge that slowing down doesn't threaten the relationship. That kind of rest heals more than we realize. I think about how marriage will change how we handle disappointment, not eliminating it, transforming it. Instead of turning disappointment into distance, I imagine us turning toward each other, naming what hurt, listening without minimizing, validating feelings without trying to fix them immediately. That response builds trust that survives hardship. Imagine us learning how to repair after misunderstandings, repair after careless words, repair after moments when we fail each other in small ways. Repair is more important than perfection, and repair requires humility. I can't wait to see how marriage deepens our emotional resilience, not making us tougher, making us steadier. I imagine us becoming less reactive to our external stressors because our foundation feels secure. I imagine us handling pressure with the turning on each other. That stability creates room for joy. I think about how marriage will shape our sense of identity, not erasing individuality, integrating it. We won't disappear into each other. We'll grow,